living in a suitcase, we're waiting out the storm.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Tell You What, the podcast, where we talk with musicians and songwriters about music and songs. My name is Mike. On our episode today, we're lucky enough to have the full complement of the indie band The Accidentals. Sav Buist, Katie Larson, and Michael Dause all joined us for a great chat centered around their new EP, Time Out Session 1. More on The Accidentals in a second. I'd like to take a minute to set my current scene. While I recorded the Accidentals interview a while back, right now I'm recording this introduction in Charlottesville, Virginia, in the attic home studio of David Wax and his wife, Suze Slezak, who comprised the band David Wax Museum. In fact, David was a guest on our previous episode. You should check that out. I was in town on some other business, and David and Suze were kind enough to let me use their space for a bit. So a big thanks to them for being so generous and accommodating. They even served me some delicious lunch, and I got a tour of Suze's gardens. The other thing that's going on here right now is that Dave and Suze have just begun construction on what will be a beautiful music studio in their backyard. A remarkably wonderful fan of their music is helping them build it. He's a builder of some pretty cool stuff, in fact, and he has also pledged a matching grant to fund the project. David and Suze have raised a lot of the needed funds from their amazing fans, but if you are a fan of their music, or frankly, a fan of supporting artists trying to come up with creative ways to keep getting their art out into the world, please check out this project at their website, davidwaxmuseum.com. I've seen the plans for the studio and it looks really amazing. I'll tell you, it is heartwarming and life-affirming to see not only the love and support Dave and Suze's fans have shown them on this project, but the creativity and dedication the two of them have exhibited in putting this thing together. So go check it out, davidwaxmuseum.com. You can click on Extras and Barn Raising to get the details. Okay, time to focus on today's episode. I had such a blast talking with Katie, Sav, and Michael from The Accidentals. They are smart, funny, thoughtful, caring, and very hard-working young artists. By the way, they are also extremely talented multi-instrumentalists, technically skilled, and creative at the same time. While still in their mid-20s, they've probably put in more road time and played more shows than a lot of artists much older than they. And as they discussed, they really love touring and playing. So when quarantine hit, it hit them pretty hard. It was a big, abrupt change. But like David Wax talked about in the last episode, they decided to make the best of it and really got to work. Here is some of what they did. They built out a home studio, learned how to use it, finished recording a full-length album on their own, did a series of live streams, Patreon shows. They did a bunch of other stuff I can't remember right now, but it was a lot. And they started regular collaborations with other songwriters via Zoom. This new EP, Time Out Sessions, was the product of some of those collaborations. As the band says, they got the chance to work with some of their songwriting heroes, world-class songwriters. Each of the songs on this EP is a co-write with a different one of these collaborators. Songs make up a really great collection. They are reflections on what the band, and in fact, all of us were going through over the last year. And as we discussed, the songs are both personal and universal, as the best songs often are. So now that things look to get back to some version of normal, look for The Accidentals in a venue near you. I know they'll be getting out as soon as they can. And enjoy this Time Out EP and our fun discussion around it. So let's get to it. Here's our Tell You What discussion with Katie, Sav, and Michael from The Accidentals.
Look at what we have. We get diamonds out of broken glass. It's just like us, all that we can hold. Bits and pieces might as well be gold. Shining in the dust, might as well be gold. Shining in the dust, might as well be gold.
All right, Katie, Michael, Sav, The Accidentals, welcome to Tell You What, the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Tell you what.
Tell you what, I am in our home studios in Evanston, Illinois. You are in your home state of Michigan. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so since we have all three of you here, which I consider a great honor, I'd like to give each of you a chance to talk at the beginning here a bit about what music you remember hearing in your earliest memories. So in your homes or communities, what do you remember musically, and if some of that maybe influences your creative process now?
Oh, right out of the gate.
Yep,
The
we're
hard
going deep.
hitters. Oh man, what do you think, Kate?
So this is Katie speaking. Hello, everyone. My earliest memories, I don't know, is a big mishmash of genres since both my parents kind of have this background in like classical music and jazz and musical theater, and my dad's a classical pianist and my mom studied voice, so I listened to a lot of musical theater soundtracks. Actually, I think Michael and I overlap in that, so listening to soundtracks and classical performances, a little bit of bluegrass. There's this great concert series here in Michigan at the Sand Dunes. So we'd go out and listen to bluegrass music every year at the Sand Dunes. And then, like, in the car, my dad would play, we had, every Bare Naked Ladies CD and, this collection of, alternative and pop music. And, Red Hot Chili Peppers would be playing on, Sundays when my dad made pancakes, stuff like that.
Yep.
Sav speaking, I grew up in Nashville. I was born there, and as a result, I heard a lot of the Chicks on the radio, and Bonnie Raitt, and Johnny Cash, and John Prine, all these people. So I kind of grew up on that from a really young age. But
and your parents were in the industry?
Yeah, my dad was also a pianist. Not the classical kind, but
right.
He's a really talented multi-instrumentalist, actually. So he was doing a lot of session work and was a touring musician in Nashville. And my mom was also in the industry as an R&B singer. So the two of them did gigs a lot together, and then eventually I came around, and we ended up moving to Michigan when I was really young, probably around 5 or 6, and a lot of my music memories became ski trips to Crystal Mountain, and on the way my dad would play Radiohead and Fountains of Wayne and True Love, Rhett Miller, all these indie rock bands. So started out very Americana, went to indie rock, and that totally makes sense for the music that we write now.
Right.
Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I was raised on a whole mishmash between my mom and my dad. My mom's a classically trained singer, and so I heard a good deal of choral music growing up. I happen to remember the PAA Zoo was a big one in our house. But then my dad was very much an 80s guy when he was in college, and so he introduced me to vinyl records and things like that. I was actually thinking about this the other night because I specifically remember the song Lullaby by The Cure in my youth. And I remember calling it the song that never ends because it has one of those 2-minute instrumental outros. And when I was a kid, 2 minutes of instrumental outro was forever. But that's a song that has stuck with me through my life. And but then on my mom's side, she played me a lot of Elton John and Barry Manilow and stuff like that.
Now that makes sense for who you are as a person.
Yeah, I'm Barry Manilow mixed with The Cure as a person.
That's a good combination, I think.
That's so funny you're talking about as a kid you kind of have these weird associations with music apart from the actual title, and I'll have to share with you guys sometime. There's this friend of ours who is nannying 3 kids, and they all have different names for our songs. Oh man, I'll pull them up later and share them.
We may have to do a follow-up episode. So the 3 of you then were raised in Michigan, right? Sav, you moved there at a young age. Can we talk about the musical traditions and the music scene in Michigan? I've come to realize there's a strong tradition there. Some of our listeners might be surprised to hear that. They might think of Detroit, Motown, some of the 70s rock that came out of there. But maybe you can talk about the more traditional music scene there, the folk, string band music, and how that has influenced you.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. This is Sav. I was kind of getting involved in the folk scene at a pretty young age. Around 12, I knew I wanted to play violin in a band one day. And so I started kind of taking my violin to places around town with my parents. My parents and I were in a family band for a while, and I would just sit in with other musicians around town So there was also a really strong like Celtic fiddling scene in Traverse City where I grew up. And so I would kind of hop in and like learn a fiddle tune from somebody by ear and like just, you know, here's the A part, here's the B part, okay, go. And we would like play that together for like tips at the state hospital or something, you know?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
there's this space, Building 50, which, like Sav mentioned, used to be this big old hospital that has been refurbished by like artists and restaurants and like shops and farmers markets, and they do like this big indoor folk festival every year. So that was some of our first gigs as a band, was like running down those hallways and jamming.
Yeah,
And we're talking about the Traverse City area here?
yeah, Traverse City, Michigan. And honestly, that area, that Building 50 Commons area, is a good metaphor for how the community is in Traverse City. It's very like art focused. It's very collaborative. There's just a really strong scene for musicians. Like every year, the Traverse City Film Festival by Michael Moore will like have musicians open for all the movies, and so it's a great way to just get exposed to a lot of people. Like we picked up a sync licensing thing through that, where we ended up scoring a movie just because we were playing before one was showing.
Oh.
So.
Would I be correct in saying that Billy Strings kind of came out of that greater scene also?
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to cycle around town. We used to see him on his bicycle. Like, he was great. You know, that was one of our first collaborations ever, was working on our album Bittersweet and calling him up and asking if he could play banjo on our record, on our song Mangrove. So we, you know, it's always been a really collaborative scene ever since we were like 15 and 16. We were really taken under the wing of other local musicians in the area.
Yeah. So let's talk about collaboration in songwriting and the creative process. I always find it interesting to hear different takes on how artists work together. And you all have quite a history here. So Sav and Katie, you met in high school, in art school. Do I have that right?
Actually, no, we met in public school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we ended up transferring to Interlochen Arts Academy for about a year, but we started out at Traverse City West Senior High and met in our public high school orchestra program. So
Okay, so was there an immediate creative collaboration between you two as far as songwriting, or did that develop over time, or how did that come to
Well,
be?
I met Sav, and I was like that kid in class who secretly wrote songs like in my bedroom and was like way too afraid to even like give a presentation in front of the class, much less like sing about my feelings.
Yep.
And Sav had like never written a song before we started like collaborating together, but she had like written all these epic short stories, and like you had like an entire novel written by the time I knew you.
I was doing gigs around town too, is the funny thing, but I was just convinced that I would never play another instrument other than violin. I'm only a harmony singer. I don't write songs. I don't sing lead, like all those things. I just told myself that. And then I met Katie, and she's like, what do you mean? You can write songs. Like, this is how you do it. And
So it hadn't crossed your mind that you were writing fiction and making music, but that these two things couldn't make sense together?
yeah, no, I never really, like, I ended up being inspired by Katie's kind of bravery diving into that field.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to, especially in high school, to like put yourself in a box, and it's something that I still kind of struggle to break out of. Is like, oh man, I wish I could do this, but nah, can't. That's not me. Like,
I mean, that's part of growing up too, is just recognizing the limitations you put on yourself and then breaking them all.
So Katie, how did you make your way out of the bedroom and start having the guts to bring your songs out?
oh, I mean, it was definitely through, playing music with Sav. I mean, I think the first time we jammed was like on the school bus. Maybe you had a ukulele,
Yeah.
and I was like, hey, I know how to play ukulele, and we started like singing this White Stripes song together. We're gonna be friends.
Yeah.
Haha, prophetic. And then I came over to her house, and we actually worked up a set because we were both part of this alternative styles for strings club, which was like the especially nerdy kids in the orchestra who met after school and played like Led Zeppelin and
We had
Coldplay.
bought sheet music arrangements of like Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. We played it in our little quartet, like doot 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 doot.
Wow.
which even that was like a little easier because at least you're in a group and you don't have to sing in front of people. But Sav and I, we both had really similar tastes in indie music at the time. Like we started learning cover tunes of like the White Stripes, but also Sufjan Stevens and Andrew Bird and
Arcade
St.
Fire.
Vincent. Yeah.
Nora Jones.
All this sort of genre-bending orchestral indie folk pop was coming out, and we started covering that. And like our first gig was like opening for Sav's family's band, and eventually like singing with Sav was the thing that made me more comfortable, because instead of just having one voice, our music from the top was very harmony driven. So there's like two people singing together, which has a lot more comfort in it.
So the fact that you were more comfortable singing with someone else made you more comfortable perhaps bringing your original songs out?
Yeah, totally. I could just pull out a song and then have Sav sing harmony and like fiddle on it, and then bam, it was like twice as cool.
Yeah. Okay, Michael, you come in a few years later, right? A musically creative person yourself. I understand you have put out a couple albums of original material, right?
Yeah.
So how did you negotiate your way into this group from a creative perspective? Obviously, you bring the percussion talents and sounds which maybe weren't there before, but now you're joining two people who've been writing and creating together for a while. So how did you find your way in?
Blackmail.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, exactly. I have dirt that nobody else knows. No, but I was a huge fan of them. I met them in 2013 at a music festival in northern Michigan called Blissfest. Shout out Blissfest. And I would literally listen to their album Bittersweet like every day after like coming home from work as like a busboy at a restaurant. It was like my high school job, right? And I just loved the record, and so I knew it like inside and out. And I had, just started talking with them over to like Facebook and stuff, and we became pretty good friends. And at one point in the summer in 2014, I was like, "Hey, can I like come and hang up with you guys like for a week or so up north?" And they were like, "Yeah." And then that turned into, "Hey, do you want to play shows with us for a month?" And I like already knew a lot of the songs, and so it kind of worked out pretty easily, which then turned into like, "Hey, do you want to drop out of college and come on the road with us full time?" And it was kind of a very quick, fast moving thing, but I'm so glad that it happened. And yeah, so I kind of just like, it was almost one of those, like I've said before, the dream of like you go to a concert and like they come out on stage and they're like, "Our drummer broke his hand and we need somebody in the crowd that knows all the songs to play right now." And like that kind of, in a sort of roundabout way, sort of happened. So
yeah, like Wayne's World 4 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I am Garth in that scenario. But yeah, so I got hooked up that way, and we've literally just been like on the road ever since, pretty much.
Did you have any difficulty becoming a contributor creatively from the songwriting side?
Katie and I actually do about 50-50 of the songwriting for the band. Lately, we've been starting to do like co-writing in between, and we're actually working on a song right now in the studio.
Yeah, I would say if I contribute things, it's more to do with arrangement aspects of songs and things like that, especially since we've been recording a lot of things ourselves these days in our studios. It's kind of been more on the like engineering, producing, arranging side of things.
All right, so let's talk about the process as it is now. You just alluded to that, Sav, about the 50-50. So we're not necessarily talking about the process for this EP, which may be different than your usual one, but let's talk more generally. If there is a general process, are you each working individually on a song, bring it to the group, starting together? What is the life cycle of maybe a creative process for you?
Yeah, well, I just want to point out that, like, first and foremost, we are mostly an indie band, which is why it's really funny that we've kind of taken on this secondary project and gone kind of more down an Americana route. Both things kind of coexist at the same time, so they have really different processes to get there as well. But the indie rock portion of our lives has to do with a lot of individual songwriting, and that's, we travel like 200 days a year. We soak in a lot of information going on around us, and songwriting is a good way to therapeutically process it, or, say things that are on our minds that, we don't really have another way to get out. So that was kind of what we used songwriting as for a long time. And the process for that is usually just like, very quiet in our bedrooms, like kind of messing around on a guitar respectively, and like coming to the table maybe a week after or a couple months after the song has been concluded, and kind of working on arrangement together in like the upstairs attic area and just kind of hashing through the song and all of its parts. Like, oh, how do we create the awe moment? All right, do we want people to laugh or cry, or like, you know, how do we get them to remember this song? So the arrangement process is very collaborative. It's very equal. But the writing is usually pretty solitary, or was before this record that we are about to put out.
So you individually are bringing something to the group that is, quote unquote, a finished song.
Yeah, pretty much. You know,
in the sense
like
that it has a start, middle, and end, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, with like a couple of maybe lyrical edits until the end, but yeah, the arrangement is like such a huge part of how the song evolves and changes.
You mentioned the road. I have the impression pre-COVID time that you all were a big-time road band. Lots of shows, lots of touring. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think one of our max years was like 250 shows a year.
That's a
bands
lot.
in town. Like, we lock everything in bands in town, and it shows up on our website. And one year they were like, you have toured the most. Accidentals have like broken the record this year.
I think they put out an article and we were like, we what?
What?
Great.
And we just like saying yes and traveling and meeting people. Like Sav mentioned, it's great fuel for songwriting. And I mean, it kept us afloat. Again, Sav said, like, we're an indie band, and we've been through a couple deals, but touring and the connection with our community and fans is really what's kept us afloat for the last 6 years.
So you kind of mentioned this already about the way the songs come together. Is there no actual writing you're doing on the road? The ideas come from there, and the actual writing, creating happens when you get back home?
I think the writing changes every time. Like, I don't think either of us have ever had the same writing process for every single song. Like, sometimes it'll start out as a sticky note on your phone, like Michigan and Again. Or, you know, other times it'll start out like as a poem in your journal that you did, like when you were in Arkansas for a day, you know? Like, it changes every time. It's more about collecting the ideas as they come and then finding a way to recycle and stitch them all back together when you have a moment to breathe, which is usually when we get back home.
Right. So now, for the last year, no road. So what has this been like in terms of that process now? What have you learned from this forced change in lifestyle?
We have learned a lot. I mean, it's kind of I think the main thing we've learned over the last year is just to slow down and really dig into our process.
You know, when we first got off the road, there was a decision that needed to be made over whether or not we would, you know, it was like literally towards the beginning of COVID, we were like, all right, we can either fly to Portland now and work with Tucker Martine, this amazing producer, and do this album and possibly get stuck there for the foreseeable future because of the virus, or we go home and, you know, we figure it out from there. And we decided to go back home because we just didn't know how long this was going to last. And, you know, about a month in, I had started writing this OBS tutorial, like how to live stream. We were figuring that out, and we were deciding, you know, depending on how long this lasts, what do we need to do to make sure that this album that we've been working on comes to fruition? And so we made this decision. It was a really hard decision. We thought about it for a long time. We were trying to figure out, can we still record this record? Is it possible to record this ourselves? And so we decided, yeah, we're going to try it. And we built the studio based on the gear that was in our trailer and pinning blankets to the ceiling with thumbtacks and taking all the CD boxes full of CDs that hadn't been sold and building them up into partition walls in the drum room. Just like taking what we had and turning it into something else. And there's like a whole music video that we made of us doing this for our song Might As Well Be Gold, which ends up on this EP. But it was just like this process of figuring out how to track, comp, engineer, write, produce, arrange, and mix your own album. And that's so much. So what we learned was not only how to do all of that, but how to work with the dynamic of that, because it does change. You know, for a band that has been traveling 250 days a year on average and hasn't really, you know, had to sit in one space for a long time, not only did we have to get used to that mentally, but we also had to learn different things about, you know, what role everybody would take making this record. For instance, I'm really kind of an impatient person. I like to do 5 takes, and then I'm going to walk away, come back, I'll comp it, be done. And, I had to be okay with okay, this song is not the right tempo, we got to do the whole thing over again. Okay, we got to do this song over again 8 times to get it right. That was really hard for me to get used to. Katie, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you had to get more assertive about what you wanted,
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. It's, I think art and music too. It's always kind of this state of compromise and doing what's best for the music, and coming up with goals and kind of staying true to those goals. So definitely getting more used to sticking to what your heart and your instinct is saying.
Michael had to let go of his ego.
Yeah, I think that.
Just kidding. He doesn't have an ego.
Go deaf.
Well, I mean, it's semi-true in the way that sometimes you want to hold on really tightly to a project, and sometimes the mantra we kept saying was kill your darlings.
Yeah.
Of if we felt like we really needed to start a song over, instead of just forcing one recording to maybe sound okay with mixing tricks and things like that, we were you know what, let's just do it over. We have the time, we can't go anywhere. We might as well do it right in the first time.
That's kind of a general songwriting creating lesson also, right? To kill your darlings, get rid of a verse that you thought was great, that kind of thing.
If I had $1 for every time, we wouldn't need to be playing music.
But it's hard because when we would do studio days before COVID, we would knock out 5 songs in 3 days.
That's true.
Just because we played them so much on the road, and we were so practiced in all of the songs usually before we would go into a studio to record them. So coming with fresh new songs that we haven't technically played out live yet, maybe we did some live streams or something, but that was a new learning curve of how to build a song in the studio without having played it for 200 days beforehand to really get a good final feel for it.
But man, what a gift to have that time to really focus on a song and make it fully intentional. We're prouder of the music that we've recorded in this time than almost anything we've ever done. It's just it's really intentional. That's
great. Most of the songs in the past that you've recorded have been played live a number of times, and I think it's interesting to think about not just from a rehearsal standpoint, but from how do you know this song is good perspective, right? If you haven't played it live, a lot of artists won't go into the studio with something they haven't played in front of an audience. So that was different too, right?
Major hurdle. Luckily, what we had done right before quarantine was we had an album preview show, a series of album preview shows where we literally printed out the whole set list, passed them out to the audience, gave everybody a pen, and they could vote on a scale of 1 to 5 whether or not they thought that the song versus that song should be on the album, and then we tallied up all the votes. And that was something we literally did a week before the world shut down.
Oh, wow.
So we were kind of lucky to have kind of a radar. And then, Michael's right, there were some songs that just ended up getting written after the world had shut down, and halfway through the album process we're well, we kind of have to add this one too, or we've been doing these co-writes, let's make another EP full of music, and we hadn't tested out that music. So it was a kind of hybridization of stuff that we were familiar with, stuff that we really weren't. And one of the biggest hurdles was trying to make decisions, based on where the song would fit, how to serve the song, what is the album saying, and what's the message, all of it kind of combining into the production value. It was really a new process for us.
So just to be clear, we're talking here about an album that is a full-length album that's going to come out later this year, right? In addition to the EP that we're kind of focusing on today.
Yeah. Yep.
And did you end up producing that yourself? Is that part of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so there were some songs that we did with producer John Congleton out in Los Angeles. He's worked with St. Vincent, the Decemberists. Yeah. And then some songs that we'd done with Tucker Martine out in Portland, Oregon. And we were going to do who's done with Nico Case and Sufjan Stevens and Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down. And we were originally going to do the rest of the album with Tucker just because he had the time and, we had planned it all out. And then we ended up having to go back home. So the rest of this album is self-produced.
Yeah, and we had pretty much wrapped the album, and we realized that touring wasn't going to come back for a while. So we decided to, as an indie band, we wanted to wait and release our full-length Vessel when we could tour it. And that's exactly when we really started focusing on the co-writes, because this whole time, we'd been writing with like Tom Paxton on Zoom every Monday, and we'd like collected 50 songs that naturally were extremely timely with all the new feelings we'd been going through in quarantine. So that's when we realized, hey, let's release some of these co-writes with an EP called Timeout.
And what's funny about that is that Vessel's all about perspective, right? And this Timeout EP is all about, grief and processing it and going through the stages of it, because that's, honestly, it's a universal thing that everybody went through this year to some extent.
Okay, so now let's talk about the EP, since you've kind of given us the intro about how this came about. This is a collection of songs you co-wrote with a series of songwriters. These are names I recognize, quite a collection of songwriters. That must have been a lot of fun and learning experience for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost a lot of sleep before the co-writes. I was like so nervous, but then on the other side it was extremely fun.
Yeah, all of these co-writes happened during quarantine. A lot of it was just so some of it was through our booking agency doing a weekly Zoom call every week. Tom Paxton happens to be on our roster, and so we were just doing this thing where everybody on the agency was doing like a song or two, and Tom heard us play and he's like, I want to do co-writing with you guys. Let's have like a weekly routine. Let's get on Zoom every Monday and do a co-write. So that's how that came about, very organically. And then, another thing that happened is like after COVID started, I wrote this tutorial on this broadcasting software called OBS. I don't even know. I went into a fever dream, and what came out of it was a 40-page manual on how to live stream. So
yeah, she does that sometimes.
But that really connected us to a bunch of venues. I started doing consultations, and in turn, that connected us to a bunch of songwriters. So I actually met Kim Richey through that process. And, whenever I met these songwriters, it'd be like, hey, are you interested in doing a co-write one day, or like maybe doing a Timeout show? And sure enough, yeah, there's a lot of people just not doing anything right now and wanting to be creative.
That's great. Let's talk about that Kim Richey co-write song, Wildfire. This is a beautiful song. Harmonies on the chorus are really great. So lyrically, while you're writing this, there were actual wildfires burning, right? Maybe that was the original inspiration, but there's also a raging pandemic, crazy, intense political situation, lots of fires, right?
Yeah.
I want to bring up the string section here too. I'm not big on string arrangements, but I think I hear like flames jumping in these strings. Did I?
Oh, yay.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did it. We did musical Foley.
Yes, it worked for me. So can you talk about this song, maybe about the wildfire metaphor here?
Yeah. In this song, wildfire is a metaphor for consequence. It's just this idea that when you look away from a problem for so long, eventually it will kind of burst into flames and take over. And the song is also about denial to some extent. One of the first stages of grieving that we went through when we first came into this time period. So this Timeout EP is following the order of events, and it's arranged that way, and Wildfire comes first just because it's just a reaction to everything that we immediately experienced. This almost like this universal bewilderment. But we tried to end the song. I remember in the process, so I'd come to this with the song idea. I sent like a voice memo at like midnight, maybe 1 a.m. to Kim and to Katie right before the co-write. I was like, how about we start with this? And it just had the Waiting on the Wildfire refrain and a first verse. And I got that Waiting on a Wildfire refrain from my mom at the dinner table. She just said it in passing. She's like, man, this whole situation feels like we're just waiting on a wildfire. And I was like, I'm taking that. But yeah, very quickly when we got on the call, it just really became about reflection on a previous time and not really knowing what was coming next. And that's where the song hung out for a long time. And then by the time we hit the third verse, which says, over time the wildflowers find a way to bloom where only ashes were before, that verse kind of felt like the most important thing that needed to be said. After all of this catastrophe, there is a chance for growth.
Right.
so, that whole song really does take a journey that all of us went through this year, and we just felt like it was really important to put it out as fast as possible once we finished writing it with Kim.
All our plans went up in smoke. Who knew we were drunk on borrowed time, waiting on a wildfire? Who knew we were waiting on a wildfire? Who knew we were waiting on a wildfire?
Let's talk about the song Night Train, co-write with Dar Williams, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This one sounds to me like, from a songwriting perspective, about going from the personal to the universal in terms of message, right? At the outset, it's a road song. The narrator's on a journey. But as the song progresses, I kind of hear it turn into a bigger picture. And then the last part of the lyrics kind of change from as I come back to as we come back, right? So
Yeah.
can you talk about the song maybe in terms of how a song can go from the personal connection or personal impression maybe to more universal?
Sure. Yeah. So that song had a totally different process as well. We did that one over the course of what had to be at least 7 to 10 Zoom calls with Dar.
Wow.
It was really cool because it was basically like what Katie said, just based it primarily on conversation. So, Dar had gone on this train ride right before the world shut down, and she had all these pictures from it, all these stories of all the people she met and the places that she saw, and we would just spend hours just talking about this train ride, and we would take the notes that we made based on that conversation and we'd go turn them into verses, and then we'd send them to her, and we'd get on another call and she'd be like, yeah, how about, we should change it a little bit so the narrator is kind of thinking this, like, she's getting on this train, she's trying to figure out what happened, and then, by the end of the song, it's like, this is how we reach our solution point. It was very organic how it was, like, started very small and kind of, this person trying to figure out what was wrong with them, and then ended with this person getting on the train and realizing that, like, this is what unites us a little bit, is we're all on this together.
We definitely didn't want to be too naive in our hope, but at the same time, like, in the place of the EP too, this is sort of like the light at the end of the tunnel song where the world was going through a lot of events over those few months that we were writing that song, and I feel like we just needed a little bit of that hope.
I think we finished it like January. Like January 2021, we finished the song and played it for the Ann Arbor Folk Festival. A couple weeks later, we had just finished like the final edit on the lyrics, which there were probably like 6 to maybe 10 different rough drafts of the lyrics.
Totally.
So it was definitely went through like it was almost as long as a train ride, honestly.
Yes.
Course
There's
of
a
the actual
metaphor.
lyrics.
The song was a metaphor for itself.
Yeah, literally, it took a journey. Very meta. But yeah, it is definitely our light at the end of the tunnel song. It's meant to represent, we're coming out of this time, and there's still work to be done, but we're ready to do it.
The Cold War continues, but now it's inside of us all. The silence surrounds us, we're waiting for morning to come. The train is still rolling, the bridge is still holding, and there is still work to be done. I'm on the night train, skyline in sight, passing the salvage yard into the morning light. Taking my time, this country of mine will get it on track. Watch the sunrise 2 or 3 times as we come back. We'll watch the sunrise 2 or three times as we come back.
Okay, we talked, I mentioned the strings in Wildfire. I would like to talk about this a little bit. I understand, Katie and Sav, you also do work as a string team, composing, arranging, recording for other artists, right?
Yeah, carrying those like orc dork roots throughout our our career.
So can you walk us through a string arrangement project where you're brought into another artist's session? Is there a typical way something like this comes together? And maybe talk a little bit about how you view that from a creative perspective, maybe in contrast to writing your own songs.
Yeah, I think the first question we usually ask is like, hey, do you what's your process? Do you like to write sheet music out? Do you like to, take a MIDI keyboard and like work out some string ideas? Or do you want us to just wing it and kind of go by ear? And it changes every time. Like some people have ideas that they want to have executed, and some people are like, I don't know, I just kind of want to hear some strings on this. And so,
right.
I think for us, one of our big priorities is making sure that the strings serve the lyrics. If it's a lyrical based song, and if they serve the music, if it's a musical based song, just kind of paying attention to the environment of the actual arrangement.
I would say our philosophy has changed a little bit in our personal music, but it really depends on what people are looking for. I can say like our early records, we'd hit the studio and like layer, and we would go as big as possible until we had like a mini orchestra. And there's something really satisfying about hearing those harmonies layer up and stack. And recently we have been seeing how much we can say with as little as possible, and playing around with dissonance, and really seeing how that can highlight the emotion. So yeah, like every song is different, but our philosophy has changed a tiny bit.
Let's talk about live performance a little bit. With so many shows under your belt for such young people, you have an interesting perspective on this. I've seen you play a couple times, always so entertaining, so joyful. What do you think makes for a good live show? What is it that you are trying to bring to the audience?
I think we're trying to bring like a sense of connectivity. Most of the reasons why we write songs are to try and connect with people on like some sort of universal emotional platform. We're trying to say what can't always be said out loud. And then when we get to a show, we're trying, depending on the venue, if it's like a quiet pack room or a small club, then we'll tell stories, we'll connect, we'll make it really like a storytelling experience, and play all of our songs that kind of encapsulate just this very songwriter-esque aspect of what we do. And then some shows are just like headbanging, hair let down, like rock shows at different clubs where we're just trying to bring the energy. So I think with our live shows, we're just trying to match the energy of the audience and trying to connect with them as much as we can. But Michael, do you have another perspective on it?
Only in the way of I always try to make funny faces behind Sav and Katie at every show, because I know they can't see it, but the audience can. And I find that really funny. But yeah, I think it's just bringing the most joy possible, and like really, I think there was a little bit of time, maybe a few years ago, where just from the volume of shows that we were playing, I know I personally was starting to like lose the songs and the touring a little bit. And so like after I kind of saw myself going into that route, it kind of became very intentional to like play every show and like really live in it and be super present in it, and not like take it for granted, especially now that we haven't been able to play many shows. But just really be intentional with it. Like people are coming to see you. I think it's easy to have imposter syndrome on the road too. Like sometimes I'll get on stage and I'll be like, oh, I don't know, like am I playing too loud? Am I not doing this thing? And then like people come up to you after the show and are like, that was amazing. And so it's like really sitting in it and really being present and just trying to connect as much as possible with all the people in the room, whether that's 2,000 people or 20 people. Oh man,
it's making me really miss it. I don't know. I'm just kind of like, man, like that's, it's been difficult to try and transition from all of the people that we used to shake hands with and meet, and like almost everybody that we've ever connected through the music industry into this. It's really hard to transition to where you haven't seen them in literally a year, but I'm hoping that it comes back.
I can't wait to see everybody. We did a live stream, and there were some comments where some of our top fan people were like, "Oh man, whatever the first show back is after COVID, like we are going ham."
Well, I'll tell you, just from talking to you here for this time, you've already brought up a number of things that were positive externalities, let's say, of this time, the projects you've done, the things you've learned. So it seems like you are definitely have made the best use of this time for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I think, other things that have helped is our Patreon really helped. We started it right before the trailer got stolen in 2019. And then, after the trailer got stolen, we got in a car crash, the van got totaled, and then right after that, the world shut down. So that Patreon has been, supporting us through some of the craziest things that we've ever experienced as a band. And, we've been doing tour blogs, weekly Corin tour blogs, and we've been doing, throwback album reviews and a book club.
We Zoom with our patrons every other week.
Yeah. And that's just been really, I think it's good for mental health, not just, for us, but for everybody who's involved in it, just because it gives us a sense of, community through music in a time where it's really, it's really hard to have that same feeling, like I was just saying. So Patreon has been really awesome for that. Yeah,
that's great. I want to give you a chance to talk about your educational projects. You started a nonprofit last year to work with young people. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. It's been a passion project for a long time, and, one of the events that kind of sparked it was we tend to go into schools and do workshops, and after we did a workshop with a high school, a girl came up to us, and she told us that she, really missed playing viola, and we said, why don't you play viola anymore? And she said she couldn't keep her instrument because she was traveling from house to house through the foster care system, and we were like, okay, everyone needs at least the opportunity to play an instrument. It was hugely influential for us to get through middle school and high school. So we just reached out, and we have this great community, like we had mentioned, in Michigan, but also we put it out online to all of our musical family and our sponsors, and we were immediately overfunded, and so we got to give this girl a viola, and we also got to connect her with private lessons. And so
we were like, we should make a nonprofit out of this.
Yeah, we were like, we kind of been doing things like that on and off between tours. And now that we've had a year off the road, we officially started Play It Forward again and again. So the way it works is teachers or students can apply, and we pair students with whatever instrument they're interested in learning, and find
we have
mentors.
Official board that overlooks the applications at this point. We're on it, and we figure out what they're interested in. We reach out to local musician friends to see who can be interested in teaching or mentoring. And then the way that the program is funded is by musicians kicking in 5% over a certain threshold of their live concert guarantees. So it's going really well. It's still we're getting started, but you can check it out. It's called Play It Forward Again and Again, and we're really excited about it.
So you talked about songwriting workshops. This is a songwriting podcast, so let's talk maybe about what some of the overall concepts or themes you might try to bring to a younger group of people when you're teaching them some songwriting.
This is so funny because we just wrapped up 6 workshops virtually about songwriting over Zoom, and they all had different themes, so this is kind of fun. What's nice about, different songwriting themes is that songwriting is kind of ageless. Like, we've taught workshops to, 75-year-olds to, 5-year-olds. They all everybody is innately, in tune to music or creativity. And Beth Nielsen Chapman is another great songwriter who actually, she was our first co-write, and she said that creativity is like oxygen. Anybody can breathe it, and we try to carry that wherever we go. But so some of the themes that we covered in our recent workshops were using books as inspiration, where we would have everybody bring a sentence from their favorite book, and we'd show how to create a song or a chorus based on based on taking words and shuffling them around. We did another one called Using Art as Inspiration, where everybody brought a different painting that inspired them, and then we just had everybody like write as many things about this painting that they could in a minute, and then we used that to create a song. What are the other ones? We did one based on like sync licensing.
Yeah, we like the underlying theme is really for any age. I feel like how to find inspiration. So that's basically where we went, because I mean you can get stuck anywhere in the songwriting process. You can get stuck before you even put a pencil to paper, or say you have an idea but you don't know, you have this little seed and you don't know how to grow it, or like maybe you don't know if the song's finished or not. So finding inspiration, I feel like, was the overall theme for anyone, especially the young students we go into schools. Like Sav said, we can show them, hey, you can like take one of your favorite songs, or take a poem that you read in your English class, or take a newspaper article and turn that into a song.
Change like 2 words, or write like you're a person in the room. And it's not only like how to start the song, but it's also maintaining that inspiration throughout the song, just because there's all kinds of roadblocks that you can hit. We found that out better through co-writing over Zoom than almost anything else. Like there are always going to be roadblocks, and the way that you get past those is just by finding different points of inspiration and working collaboratively and not being afraid of whether or not it's good or bad in the moment. It's such a time waster. You can't get dragged down like that.
I would guess that through teaching these workshops, it has helped you all progress in your songwriting as well.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since we've had time to sit down and write a personal
I feel
song.
like I've had this battle where I'm teaching people how to be inspired, but lately I've just been I don't know what to write about. So it's also carving the time out to take some of your own advice, and that has been a big theme of this last year too, is mental health, because like Michael said earlier, we are used to doing 3 days in the studio where from 10 a.m. to midnight you're working and you're putting this music together, or you're on tour, and you just can't do that when you're at home. It's you have to take time, you have to take care of yourself, you have to do your laundry, you have to take a shower, you have to build in that time. So that's been a big piece of that mental health going forward.
I heard one of you mentioned that I don't know what to write about, and your first thought as a non-songwriter is, they have all this time, they're going to write all these songs. But don't you think that not being out on the road and not touring is not giving you the experiences and the interactions that really are the heart of a lot of your ideas?
I think there's a song on the Time Out EP that kind of best summarizes how we've taken that and processed it. It's called Might As Well Be Gold, and it's all about, the things that we can still be grateful for. I think experience happens wherever you decide it happens. You have to just kind of stop everything you're doing and take in the fact that you can process color, or that you live in a place where the snow is so pristine. Even if it is just heavy and falls all the time, it's pristine and it looks gorgeous today, or it's falling in this way that really strikes you in the moment. Yes, the connectivity of being on the road is so integral, but there's also just so much to still write about during this time, even just the way that you're processing this time, to put something to words, to put how you feel to words. It has heart too, especially since we're all processing this together. Writing about this experience, is a source of healing for people who listen to it too, because we all need to know that we're not alone in this. And we felt like that before, and we feel like that now.
I like it. Let's talk about one more song. Anyway, co-written with Tom Paxton, right? Okay, I'm not a young man. In fact, I'm willing to admit this. My daughter Lucy is an associate of yours, right? So I'm older. I first heard Tom Paxton when I was a young boy, and my 98-year-old father played his records around the house, right? So pretty wonderful that Tom himself is still creating and collaborating. What was it like to work creatively with someone who is maybe several musical generations ahead of you, right? It'd be one thing to say, we're going to honor this person by covering one of his songs, but here you are actually creating with him. So what was that like, and can you talk maybe about the song a little bit?
Yeah, Tom is amazing to work with. I mean, he is just constantly like dropping these like nuggets of wisdom and telling us stories about his life and about his songwriting process. And he always comes to the table with an open mind, which I think just feels really good. Like it's a safe space to write. So most of the songs we've written with him, usually we come to the table with an idea, or he'll give us a prompt. And Anyway was a song that Sav brought to the table with a little voice memo.
Late at night.
Late at night, as usual.
Yeah, this is, I think this is the heaviest song on the Time Out EP. It's definitely just absorbing the most amount of grief and loss and anger. And it's a song about mental health. I know we've been talking about it a lot, but everybody is going through it right now. It's becoming something more talked about, as it should be. And I think part of that is because of the extreme isolation that a lot of people have experienced to different degrees this year. But there are some days where I think everybody knows the kind of day where you just really don't want to get out of bed. And that was just something I was experiencing, early on in the year, and I just needed to put words to it. And it's funny because, one of the things that we teach in our workshops is stream of consciousness being a great way to get started. And this was one of those. And I was a little worried when it came out that it was too heavy. Like, how we were talking about injecting hope into the last verse of every song,
Right.
Or the chorus. And there's not a whole lot there for this one. It's mostly just being like, it's just another morning. It's just another day. And you can take that two different ways. It's be like, all right, another day to try something new. Or, it is another day that I don't want to get out of bed. And I think the variability of that chorus is just important for whoever needs to know that they're not alone in that feeling one way or another. I think it's just important to process that grief, and to realize that not everything, every album is going to have its point of just feeling like you're at the rock bottom. Every process in life is gonna have that too. So yeah, that's where the song comes from. And it was really interesting to write that with Tom, because he is, 83 years old. We're 25. There's a 60-year age gap in between us.
Right.
And yet he's able to help put some of this to words. I didn't have a third verse or a second verse, and he helped piece together what we were feeling, all three of us, really. And we were able to kind of find words to what the general feeling of society right now is. And that was kind of incredible to have, cross-generational emotional equivalence. And I think it's just important to bridge those gaps when you can. Everybody is going through something, and I think that's what that song is about.
Yep, that's great.
I'm afraid of what we've made. It's a consequence of silence. There's no beauty in the violence. Daybreak, I lie awake. It's just another sunrise. It's just another sunrise. Anyway.
Okay, I think I've taken almost enough of your time up today.
We could talk for another hour, honestly.
I know, I
This
could
is like
too.
therapy.
We're like, oh my gosh, we need to do more podcasts to just like.
Well, maybe
process.
episode 2. There is a second part of this EP.
Yeah.
It's going to be a second half of this. But I do have one more question, something I like to ask all of my guests. Do any of you play the musical Saw?
I do.
Sav Buist.
Hi.
She brought it to our high school cafeteria
Yeah,
one day.
I don't actually
at
ask
art
that
school.
to all of my guests. I happen to
They don't
read
allow
something.
musical saws at art school cafeterias, by the way, just for future reference for anybody
you
who
s-
would.
Do you still play the musical Saw?
Yeah, I've played it on a couple of records of ours, actually.
You have.
Oh, yeah, on Bittersweet. It's on a bunch of them. I was really getting excited about it. And I still have it. There's no difference between a musical saw and regular saw. It just says, there's like a stamp on the side that says musical. But, if you have your bow and you have a good upper arm strength, you can play the saw too. That's the lesson to take away from today. Also,
All
I
right.
remembered what those kids called one of our songs. They call the end the running song because
Yeah,
it's
I
fast.
remember that one too.
And
Wait.
I think that's adorable.
Yeah, you don't have to include this, but okay.
But
Okay,
that means
so
we're definitely going to include it.
all right, so Nathan is one of the boys. He is 7 years old, I believe. He calls our song Michigan and again the lay down in the grass song.
I love that because it
that's
just has
awesome.
total disregard for the state, which is like the most memorable part of it. It's all about laying in the grass.
And
great.
they call Crow's Feet the structure song.
The what?
The structure song.
Structure.
Structured and comforting is one of the lines.
Oh my goodness,
wow.
kids are
Right?
amazing.
All right, there's your little
Your
tidbit.
nugget.
I think we're going to lead with that section. Okay, guys. Thank you all, Sav, Michael, Katie. Thanks so much for taking the time today. I look forward to, and as you mentioned, your fans, and we all look forward to seeing you out on the road in person sometime soon.
Hey, thanks so much for talking to
Thank
us.
you.
Oh,